John Holloway, a 58-year-old retired entrepreneur, had spent a lifetime building a successful business and amassing a considerable fortune. His loyalty to his family had been unwavering, providing his wife, Linda, and their two grown children, Melissa and Patrick, with comfortable lives. However, upon his retirement, John learned that wealth could also attract deception from those closest to him. After retiring, John discovered a box of letters from his late father, detailing a secret inheritance intended solely for John's use in his later years, with specific instructions to preserve it for a family trust. The inheritance included a massive estate and a significant sum, meant to be passed down with care. Unbeknownst to John, his wife Linda had also discovered these letters and, along with Melissa and Patrick, began hatching a plan to secure the entire inheritance. Their scheme was subtle at first, suggesting John's health was declining and that he might benefit from placing everything in their names for safekeeping. Linda would feign worry about his well-being, encouraging him to sign over control of his finances. Meanwhile, Melissa and Patrick pretended to be responsible, persuading him that they would handle everything wisely. John, however, began to notice inconsistencies. Secretive conversations, financial documents going missing, and increased pressure to transfer assets. His suspicion grew, and he secretly rewrote his will, ensuring his true intentions were documented elsewhere, in a secure trust. When John eventually confronted Linda, she denied any wrongdoing, but evidence he'd collected suggested otherwise. Feeling betrayed, John removed Linda, Melissa, and Patrick from his primary inheritance, deciding instead to leave the legacy to his estranged younger brother, Robert, whom he hadn't seen in years. To ensure his children and Linda would not be destitute, he left them small provisions but nowhere near the substantial fortune they had schemed to take. However, after John's passing, Linda, Melissa, and Patrick resurfaced, claiming that John's original will had been tampered with and that they had a right to the inheritance. They hired lawyers, creating a public spectacle, attempting to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Linda, Melissa, and Patrick knew that challenging the will would be a long and costly battle, but they saw John's fortune as their rightful legacy. With their hired legal team, they filed a lawsuit, contesting the trust's validity and claiming that John had been coerced into making changes in his final days. Robert, John's estranged brother and the new heir to the majority of the estate, was overwhelmed when he received notice of the lawsuit. John's intentions had been clear. Robert was to hold and distribute the family's wealth responsibly, preserving it for future generations. However, the lawsuit threw everything into chaos, and Robert now found himself in the center of a family drama he'd thought he had left behind long ago. As the case went to court, Linda and the children painted John as a fragile old man manipulated by an outsider. They portrayed Robert as someone who had swooped in to steal their family's inheritance, exploiting John's weakened mental state. However, unbeknownst to them, John had left a meticulous record of his suspicions and his reasons for cutting them out of the main inheritance. Robert's legal team presented this evidence, including recordings of private conversations, financial documents, and even a signed statement from John explaining his final wishes. Linda, realizing her position was weakening, tried a different approach. She began a media campaign, appealing to the public's sympathy, claiming that John had been unfairly influenced. She painted Robert as a manipulative figure who took advantage of an aging, vulnerable man. The public outcry grew, and soon, the case became a national spectacle, with people choosing sides and media outlets covering every development. However, Melissa, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the lies, began to question the morality of what they were doing. She approached her brother, Patrick, urging him to consider whether they should continue fighting for money that John clearly hadn't intended for them. Patrick, however, was determined. For him, this was not just about money but a sense of entitlement. In his mind, everything John had belonged to him as the rightful heir, regardless of his father's final decisions. As the court proceedings dragged on, Robert's attorneys unveiled the final piece of evidence, a video recording. In the video, John spoke directly to his family, explaining his choices and expressing his disappointment in their attempts to manipulate him. He revealed how Linda had tried to convince him he was ill to gain control of his assets, and how Patrick and Melissa had feigned loyalty to gain his trust. His message was clear: if they valued his legacy, they would respect his final wishes. The court ruled in favor of the trust, honoring John's last testament and awarding Linda and the children a small portion. They were barred from accessing any further inheritance, which was instead preserved in a trust overseen by Robert, who agreed to manage it with integrity, as John had intended. But even after the ruling, Linda, Melissa, and Patrick couldn't let go. They continued to claim publicly that John had been misled and that the family wealth was stolen from them. However, their attempts to challenge the verdict further only backfired, isolating them from both family and friends. The public, once sympathetic, now saw their relentless pursuit as a greedy vendetta, and they faced backlash in their personal and professional lives. Meanwhile, Robert, honoring his brother's legacy, invested part of the inheritance in charitable causes John had been passionate about. The rest he secured for future generations, ensuring John's true intentions would be preserved. In the end, Linda, Melissa, and Patrick were left with a bitter realization. By prioritizing money over family, they had lost not only their inheritance but also the respect of those around them. The inheritance that had once seemed within their grasp was now forever out of reach, a consequence of their own deceit. Months passed after the court ruling, but Linda, Melissa, and Patrick could not move on. The loss of the inheritance haunted them daily. Linda, desperate to reclaim her former lifestyle, started devising ways to take down Robert. She felt humiliated not just because she lost the money, but because her deception had been exposed so publicly. Driven by a mix of revenge and entitlement, she reached out to some of John's old business associates, hoping they might help her find loopholes or secrets in Robert's handling of the inheritance. Patrick, however, spiraled further into bitterness. He could not accept that his father's legacy had slipped through his fingers. Fueled by resentment, he started spreading false rumors about Robert in their community, claiming that Robert had manipulated his way into the inheritance. He even took to social media, posting twisted stories and edited videos in an attempt to sway public opinion back in his favor. Melissa, though initially part of the scheme, was starting to feel the weight of her guilt. She remembered her father's warmth, his dedication to their family, and how she had betrayed him in his final days. While Linda and Patrick continued their relentless campaign, Melissa decided to reach out to Robert. In a moment of vulnerability, she contacted Robert, asking for a meeting to discuss the inheritance and the family rift it had caused. Robert, wary of her motives, was reluctant but agreed to meet in a neutral place. When they met, Melissa confessed her regrets, admitting that greed and pressure from her mother and brother had clouded her judgment. She apologized sincerely, expressing her hope to reconcile. Robert, seeing the sincerity in Melissa's eyes, offered her a choice. He could not alter the inheritance, as it was bound by John's trust, but he extended a hand, offering her a role in helping with the charitable projects funded by John's estate. He believed this could be her way of honoring her father's memory. Touched by his offer, Melissa accepted. She started working closely with Robert, learning about the causes John had been passionate about and finding fulfillment in giving back to the community. This role became her way of making amends and reconnecting with her father's values, though the strained relationship with her mother and brother remained a source of heartache. Meanwhile, Linda and Patrick's actions continued to backfire. Patrick's smear campaign against Robert led to several defamation lawsuits, forcing him into financial ruin. Linda, once respected in their social circle, was now seen as a woman consumed by greed and desperation. Her former friends distanced themselves, and she found herself increasingly isolated. Linda's last attempt to claim any part of the inheritance was a desperate letter to the trust's board, accusing Robert of fraud. The board, however, had been fully aware of John's wishes and knew that Robert had been honoring them impeccably. They dismissed Linda's accusations, and the case was finally closed, leaving Linda and Patrick with no remaining options. Years later, Melissa had become a key figure in the foundation that managed her father's legacy, transforming the estate into a symbol of community support. Her life had changed, filled with purpose and meaning, and she had finally let go of the bitterness that had once consumed her family. Linda and Patrick, however, continued their lives, haunted by the very inheritance they had failed to secure. And so John's true legacy endured, not in the hands of those who sought it out of greed, but with those who cherished his memory and honored his intentions. As the years passed, the consequences of Linda and Patrick's greed became even more apparent. The public backlash from the defamation lawsuits left Patrick struggling to find work. His reputation was ruined, and job offers became scarce. Friends and former colleagues had grown tired of his bitterness and entitled behavior, distancing themselves one by one. Eventually, he found himself alone, drifting from one short-term job to another, barely making ends meet. Linda, once proud and socially active, had also fallen from grace. No longer invited to gatherings, she spent her days reminiscing about the life she used to have, haunted by the memories of her deception and failure. The inheritance she once felt entitled to became a bitter reminder of her loss, a chapter she could never seem to close. Her bitterness toward Robert and her own daughter, Melissa, deepened. In her mind, they had both betrayed her. Robert by stealing her husband's fortune and Melissa by choosing to align with him. Melissa, meanwhile, flourished in her new role at the foundation. Working alongside Robert, she poured her energy into projects that honored her father's values. She organized educational programs, set up scholarships for underprivileged students, and even established a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, inspired by her father's legacy. Each project brought her a step closer to peace, and slowly, her guilt turned into a sense of purpose. One day, Melissa decided to reach out to her mother and brother, hoping to extend an olive branch. She invited them to an event at the foundation, where a new community center would be dedicated in John's name. Patrick refused outright, accusing Melissa of trying to rub her success in his face. Linda, however, was tempted. Curiosity about her daughter's new life and lingering pride in the Holloway name drew her in. On the day of the event, Linda arrived, trying to mask her resentment with forced politeness. As she listened to Melissa's heartfelt speech about their father's values and legacy, Linda felt a pang of regret. She realized that while she had been consumed by her own greed and sense of loss, Melissa had managed to turn their father's legacy into something far greater than money. This was John's true inheritance, a legacy of community, kindness, and responsibility. After the event, Melissa approached Linda with a cautious smile, offering her a chance to reconcile. Linda, feeling a mixture of pride and shame, hesitated but ultimately accepted. For the first time, she saw that Melissa had grown beyond the pursuit of wealth, something Linda herself had never managed to do. Though their relationship remained strained, the event marked the beginning of a slow, tentative reconciliation. Patrick, however, continued down a self-destructive path. Refusing to let go of his bitterness, he became isolated and angry. He would occasionally reach out to Melissa, not to reconnect, but to demand money, claiming she owed him for stealing their father's legacy. Each time, Melissa patiently explained that the foundation was dedicated to charity, not personal gain. Frustrated, Patrick only sank deeper into resentment. Years later, as Melissa continued her work at the foundation, she found peace in knowing she was honoring her father's wishes. She had built a life filled with purpose, far removed from the greed and entitlement that had once plagued her family. Robert, proud of her growth, eventually handed over more responsibilities, trusting her to carry on John's legacy. In the end, the inheritance saga served as a defining moment for each of them. Melissa transformed her guilt into purpose, creating a legacy her father would have been proud of. Linda, though humbled, found a way to let go of her anger, reconnecting with her daughter. Patrick, consumed by bitterness, remained a stark reminder of the cost of greed, forever haunted by the fortune he believed should have been his. Years passed, and Melissa's work at the foundation only grew in impact. Under her leadership, John Holloway's legacy had expanded to include numerous community projects, including youth mentorship programs, educational grants, and housing initiatives. The foundation became a respected institution, admired not just in their city but across the state. Melissa found fulfillment in her work and peace in knowing she had redeemed her relationship with her late father. Linda, although still struggling with lingering resentment, started attending some of the foundation's events. Over time, she saw the real impact of John's legacy, recognizing that it was something far greater than the wealth she had once coveted. Gradually, she began volunteering at the foundation, working quietly behind the scenes to support her daughter's efforts. This work became her own path to redemption, a way to finally connect with John's values and leave behind her obsession with money. One evening, after an event celebrating the foundation's anniversary, Melissa and Linda shared a quiet moment together. Melissa noticed the change in her mother, who seemed softer, more at peace. Linda, with tears in her eyes, finally apologized for the years of deception and manipulation, admitting that her actions had been driven by fear and greed. Melissa embraced her, grateful that their relationship had found a way to heal. Patrick, however, remained estranged, unwilling to let go of his bitterness. He continued down a path of self-destruction. Occasionally, he would reach out to Melissa with demands for money, only to be met with her refusal. Each rejection deepened his resentment, driving him further into isolation. His anger, once aimed at Robert and Melissa, eventually turned inward, leaving him lonely and defeated. One day, Melissa received word that Patrick had been arrested after a drunken altercation. She went to see him, hoping to offer him one last chance to find a new path. But Patrick, even in his lowest moment, clung to his bitterness, refusing her help and blaming her for his downfall. Heartbroken, Melissa left, accepting that some wounds were beyond her ability to heal. As the years rolled on, Melissa became a celebrated figure in the community, known not just for her work, but for her resilience and compassion. The foundation had transformed John Holloway's legacy into a lasting source of hope for countless people, achieving far more than mere wealth ever could. Linda, too, found a sense of purpose in supporting her daughter's mission, and though she would never fully escape the shadow of her past actions, she found peace in the knowledge that she had finally honored her husband's memory. Patrick's fate served as a somber reminder of the destructive power of greed. He remained distant, estranged from his family and the legacy he once felt entitled to. In contrast, Melissa and Linda continued to build a legacy of service and compassion, carrying John's values forward in ways that would be remembered long after they were gone. In the end, John's inheritance lived on, not in material wealth, but in the lives touched, the communities uplifted, and the family he had ultimately inspired to grow beyond the pitfalls of greed. His legacy, transformed through love and redemption, became a story of renewal and purpose, shaping a brighter future for generations to come.